All right, we want to continue the conversation on education. We often talk about the need for Christians to step in and to use the gifts that God has given them in the arena, just like we were talking with Sonia Shaw, and just as she has done. And churches can, and frankly should, lead the way in this effort. Well, we are joined now to continue this conversation on how churches can have a similar impact on their own communities. And joining me now is Gina Gleason. She's the Executive Director of Real Impact. Gina, welcome to the program. Glad to have you on Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our honor to have you. Well, listen, tell us about the work that you are doing really to help Christians engage in their local school boards.
Well, I've been doing this for 18 years, serving as the executive director of Real Impact, and we are a ministry helping churches understand what their rights are and how they can stand for righteousness in the public square. We provide information to not only other churches, but to our own church and our congregation and to my senior pastor. And we are all about monitoring legislation that is coming out of Sacramento, our state capital, and Washington, D.C., and making sure that our congregation and fellow Christians across the state of California are informed. And as a matter of fact, we have people following us from all over the country.
Well, it's absolutely thrilling to see, and basically what you have is a group of Christians who are observing some horrible trends, some horrible things taking place in our school boards across the country, for that matter, but stepping up to the plate locally and getting involved in this. How did this begin? How did Real Impact get started?
Real Impact was an established ministry long before I got to the church. It was a vision of my senior pastor, Jack Hibbs. And so I stepped into the role, like I said, 18 years ago, and slowly but surely the Lord showed me how to get involved in the community and how to understand legislation, policies, procedures, school boards, elections, you name it. He opened the door for us to learn about the impact that the church could make. And so I've learned so much, and I want to share it with other churches. And that's been our goal for many, many years.
Well, that's fantastic. You know, the scripture teaches us to be salt and light as Christians, and that doesn't really matter at all what country or where we live, anywhere in the world. If you are a child of God, you're called to be salt and light in that sphere of influence in that place where you have been put. And it is impossible, I'm convinced, to be salt and light without being engaged. By definition of the biblical teaching, being salt and light requires being engaged. And I just, again, want to say thank you and hats off to all of your fellow believers who are engaging the culture on this extremely important ground of schools right now. Can you share with us some of the success stories that you've had over the years?
Well, just for instance, last night we had a school board.
This is a great place to start.
Yeah, that was a great success. We worked closely with a group of leaders throughout California to put together a policy that said parents should know about what's happening with their children. So we collaborated with leaders across the state, and we had a success when the school board voted this policy into place, notifying parents when these things are happening to their children while they're on school property. And it's not just about a child identifying as a new gender. It's also about a child saying things about wanting to commit suicide, or a child being physically harmed while on school property. And I think everybody wants to focus on the gender part of it. That is important. That's a big part of it, but it was not just for that reason. So we put together a policy that is legally defensible, that is something that any school district can adopt across the state. As a matter of fact, I've had probably over 7 school districts reach out to the coalition this morning and want to put this policy into place. So we have set up a website to help schools all over the place, all over California, put this in place. It's CA for California, caparentalrights.org. There, parents, school leaders can get information about how to place this policy on their school board agenda and get this passed into law.
caparentalrights.org. All right,
.com.
friends.
I'm sorry, dot com. I'm sorry.
All right. gaparentalrights.com. All right, so why is it so, and I think we know the answer to this, but we need to verbalize it. And we have people all across the country that are watching and listening right now. Why is it so critically important for churches, for pastors, for believers to lead the way in so many of these type of efforts?
Well, let California be a warning or an example to the rest of the country. The legislature in California has issued several bills this year that are literally taking our parental rights away. One bill actually allows a child, a minor, 12 years old and older, to be placed in a residential facility without mandating that the parents are notified. And there's a few bills similar to that. And that's part of what I do is I monitor those types of bills that come out of the state capitol, and I pass this out to the other churches in the state. But we are absolutely appalled that this is coming from our legislature, so much so that we are actually organizing a rally on the steps of the Capitol on August the 21st, it's a Monday, to protest all the legislation that is coming out and really taking the rights of the parents to raise their children according to their values, even to the point of what we're calling state-sanctioned kidnapping.
Wow. Well, we would like to keep a pulse on that as it's developing and as that rally is unfolding. Gina, we would appreciate that a great deal. And I think you bring up a great point in that answer that in so many ways, what happens in California does tend to impact the rest of the country, or for people to somehow suppose that what happens in California is not of importance to me and to our local school district is really pretty naive thinking, because this whole movement is a national movement and it's having its impact all across the country. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the best things that parents can do from other states is to look at the legislation and the policies that we're trying to put in place and put them in place into their school districts now before it actually gets to the point where it's really difficult to fight this movement.
Great point. Great point. All right. So you're working in a coalition, a lot of other churches, primarily there in California, just 7 different school districts contacting you this morning alone. So let's take this out a little bit further. You are blessed to be in a church that has some of these, the vision and the understanding to be engaged in some of these things. What would you say to other churches, other Christians who are in churches perhaps that don't have this type of vision? How can they follow your lead?
Well, I think that what's happened is that our ministry has gained a reputation of being a ministry that they can trust. So I'm going to encourage people to follow us at realimpact.us, and they can find out what's going on in California. We offer suggestions of how a church can get involved, and we don't insist that a church does ministry like we set up our ministry at our church, but there's plenty of ways for a church to get involved because it's legal and it's the right thing to do. But we have a responsibility to protect and defend our children. And most people do not follow legislation, nor do they know what to do once they hear about it. That's where we step up. We make everything easy for the average person who doesn't understand legislation to understand it and to know what to do. The action steps, the materials, everything is so accessible. It's all on our website. Our materials are downloadable. We don't use legislative lingo. We talk the language of the everyday person so they can understand the seriousness of what's coming out of our state capitol.
Great. Give me that website one more time.
realimpact.us.
Gina Gleason, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch. Congratulations again on a tremendous victory. Keep the torch ablaze.